Good morning. Welcome to the Thought Smash podcast. Today we have Rabbi Weiss with us, who will be educating us about how the Torah and Judaism forbids the concept of a Jewish state. He will explain to us the history of Zionism and the impact that it has on the Jews who follow the Torah as it should. Thank you for joining us, Rabbi Weiss, and I'll go right into it. Now, how do you explain to the people how the Torah and other Jewish texts support the view that Jews are not allowed to establish their state?
Well, first, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so sanctify His name, and inshallah bring peace to the world. Amen. Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be on your show, and hopefully that this will, with God's help, maybe be a catalyst from the people comprehending this what is happening here, the false understanding of what the conflict is in the Holy Land, and by understanding what it really is about, maybe they'll be able to influence world leaders. And it sounds like a big tall order, but that we should be able to stop, with God's help, this occupation and bring peace to the world with God's help. Well, first of all, as I'm explaining, the world has a narrative. The world believes that we have a Jewish state, a so-called Jewish state, and there is a very deep, ingrained conflict between Muslims and Jews, and between the Palestinian people and the Jewish people, and in that manner, therefore, the people, the Muslim people around the world, and especially the Palestinians, are vilified and looked at as people who do not countenance another people, and therefore they were able to come to the point where we're standing today of the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, the dehumanization of the people in Gaza, that they could be standing today, or I believe it's 129 days already, the bombing, the simple slaughter of the people of Gaza, that's beyond comprehension, beyond only if it is to comprehend this is if you have note and that the world has accepted that they're not human beings. That's the only explanation for this. So it's our obligation as Jews to clarify, to rectify, to have the world understand what the truth is, and that everything is turned on its coin. The victims are the ones that call themselves the victims are actually the villains, and the villains and the ones who they portray as the villains, that they demonized and dehumanized the people of Palestine, they are simply victims. So explain with God's help. The Torah is the bond that the Jewish people made with the Almighty 3,000 years ago. It's our covenant. It's the Jewish people on Mount Sinai 3,000 years ago. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to God on Mount Sinai, went up on Mount Sinai, and God gave him this Torah, which is the laws, and this covenant that we made to uphold. He brought it down to the Jewish people, and we accepted upon ourselves to be a Jewish nation. That is to be subservient to God. That is what Judaism is, to be subservient to God. And how do we do this? By observing all the laws that God required of us. This happened 3,000 years ago. It's the same covenant today that was 3,000 years ago. We uphold it. We try to uphold it to its fullest with God's help. And it doesn't. We're forbidden to stray from this even one itty bit. And this is what we have to uphold. As time changes, different new things are invented, electric and so forth. So different things, technology, and what we try to do. Then we have to understand how we are to take this new technology, this new world that we're living in, and that we should conform our lives with this new technology to the Torah. And like an example I would give is you have the concept of electric. Jews are not are commanded by God, one of the 10 commandments, that we to work 6 days and the seventh day to rest, to show that we believe God created the world 6 days, and the seventh day he rested. So we are stringently forbidden to work on the Sabbath or to make any fire or so much. Now, when electric was created, people the question arose: is this considered fire? Are we allowed to turn on a light on the Sabbath? And the rabbis delved into the issue, and they came out across the board or in the whole world that we are forbidden to use electric on the Sabbath. That said, we're allowed to open the lights before the Sabbath, but on the Sabbath we're not allowed to open lights and so forth. We have to prepare it before the Sabbath that there should be lights in the rooms and so forth. So I'm just giving one example, but we never say that the world changed and therefore our Torah changed, or we can change it. God is above time and place. God is all over, and the Torah is like the blueprint given from God. So it's also a spiritual concept. It's above the concept of time, and therefore it's God gave that Torah as a blueprint to the world. It is the same applicable today as if it was given today. It's the same. So it's really the world, although it seems to change, you can't say therefore it's an old-fashioned thing. The Torah applies to us. It was a little bit of a long explanation, but anyway, that's how we as Jews who are religious, we obey the Torah. We look at it as it's given to us today, and it is to be subservient to God. It is not to kill, not to steal. It is that we have to mahu racham afata teracham. Just as God is compassionate, you must be compassionate. We are to follow the laws. We are to always show gratitude to people that did good to us. Zionism is a movement that started a mere 140 years ago in that range, and they're basically a movement of non-religious Jews. That is, Jews who left the folds of religion.
Rabbi Weiss, so I know we have a whole portion on Zionism I want to get to. So if we can save that for later, because I know you have
fine,
a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Sure, certainly.
I wanted to.
Right.
One thing I want to ask.
Now I'll go further then in this concept. Yeah. Now, the Torah is clear that when God took us out of Egypt at that point in time, 3,000 years ago, God took us out of Egypt with miracles, the 10 plagues that was given to Pharaoh in Egypt, because he didn't want to let the Jewish people leave. Then God took us across the Yam Suf, the Red Sea, and it split, and through miracles, and all the Jewish people saw this happening. We went up on Mount Sinai. Moses went up on Mount Sinai, brought us the Torah, and God required of us at that time to go into the Holy Land, and it was called the Holy Land. Because we consider God is all over and he rules all over, but the Holy Land is like his garden, so to say. And we were commanded to go in, and as servants to the Almighty, we should build a temple for him. And God warned us, and this is very replete in the Torah. We are not when we go into the Holy Land, we have to be very careful not to sin, to be on a very high level of spirituality. And we are warned that if we're not on that level, then the land will reject us. It's like a body is sensitive. You can't just put in a foreign object in a body. It's a very sensitive. The Holy Land is sensitive. So if we're not on that special level of holiness, the land will reject us. We will be sent into exile. And this is the words of later the Jews went in. They built a temple. King Solomon built a temple where we served God. And then we had prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, King Solomon himself. They all wrote about the fact that we were warned if we're not on this level, we will be sent into exile. Eventually, as in the time and King Solomon wrote that, by the time of Jeremiah the prophet and Isaiah, they warned the Jews that we're not on that level. We have to be very careful. We'll be sent into exile, and that came about 1,000 years around after this taking the Torah after we went in, and that was the destruction of the temple, which happened 2,000 years ago. So 2,000 years ago, we were dispersed amongst the nations. It happened through the Romans and the Greeks later. We were dispersed amongst the nations. But we looked and we knew and understood, and we were told by the prophets, and every Jew accepted, that it wasn't because we were physically inept, that we were physically lacking, we didn't have the power. It was because God, it was decree that we are not on that high level that we're supposed to be on. Therefore, we were dispersed amongst the nations. We are sent into exile as a nation. Individuals remained living in the Holy Land, but as a nation, we are sent into exile. And we were put on the oath by God. And King Solomon, the one who built the temple, actually wrote in his book of Song of Songs, Shir Hashirim, where he warns the Jews that we're going to, when we're going to be sent into exile, we're going to put on the three oaths. One, that we should, from God, three oaths of God, that we are not to return. We are not to return en masse in large numbers. We are not to rebel against any nations. We have to be loyal citizens in every country we are, and thirdly, we're not to make any attempt to end exile. So we have three oaths, very, very clear, that Jews, from the time we were dispersed amongst the nations, we were taken out in bondage by the Romans, we were sent into exile. We are forbidden to attempt to return and create any concept of a Jewish sovereignty. Even 1 inch, 1 centimeter of Jewish sovereignty is forbidden for us, and regardless actually of what land. But secondly, we are forbidden to return en masse in large numbers, and we have to be loyal citizens in every country we were dispersed amongst. So this is basics of the 101 of Judaism. Why today our rabbis, and for 2,000 years, although we went through many hardships, the Inquisition, the Crusades, and there was times that there were very rich Jewish communities that were capable of buying a piece of land and creating Jewish sovereignty, a Jewish homeland, but it was never done because we're in exile as a decree of God, until ultimately we want to return to God, because returning to the Holy Land is not that we're yearning, aspiring to get a piece of real estate, to be a nation as other nations. We are yearning for that closeness to God. We are yearning for the day when the Almighty will forgive our sins. He will make a metaphysical change in the world where all humanity will recognize one God. The Messiah will come. Then he will return us, gather us in. And at that time, God will make a temple himself without any human intervention, and all humanity will serve him. Then that is what we aspire to, for the closeness of God, not a piece of land, but the closeness of God. So we say that in all our prayers. Anybody who takes the Jewish prayers, they say in the daily prayers, we pray for the day when God will reveal his glory throughout the world, when God's name will be sanctified throughout the world. That is what the Jewish people yearn and pray for. Never to preempt that and to create a state that is unacceptable.
So you mentioned something like the oath, right? And this is where I'm very interested in the people would interest me knowing about Torah Carta. I apologize if I butchered the name, but this is something you guys have been very visible, throughout the community. We've seen, in Europe and like London and the streets of America. And can you give a history of, almost like you guys are here to protect this oath from people who are deviating or corrupting Judaism?
Well, with God's help, the people who were estranged, Zionism, I said, started like 140 years ago, but actually it started not out of a vacuum. There was a movement 100 years prior to that called Reform Judaism. Now, that was a movement, throughout history, the people who are very pious, practicing the religion, people who were less pious, but they knew that if they're not practicing it properly, they have to better themselves. Judaism is what it is. It's this relationship we have with God, the subservience to uphold the Torah. There's the ones who are greater scholars, the ones who are more connected to the Almighty, so to say, and they're doing what's right, and the ones who are lacking this is simply not observing properly. But then a movement started like 250 years ago called reform, where somebody who happened to be quite knowledgeable, a scholar, but he was a Satan, he was a sinner. He came along and he said, "Oh, you don't have to keep the Torah. The Torah was like, one of the concepts was that it was given by Moses. He created Torah, and that wasn't given by God. And you can pick and choose what you would like from it. Whatever's practical, you can do." And they made Reform Judaism, which is today very prevalent in the U.S. It's the largest group of what they call a Jewish a branch of Judaism. We don't consider it a branch of Judaism, but basically they are saying, "Oh, you see, you can pick and choose what you want. You're not bound by the laws of the Torah, by the Ten Commandments." So they don't even keep the Ten Commandments, like Sabbath, which is the basics of Judaism, that God created the world 6 days, 7 days. They don't keep kosher. They just pick what they would like. Now this movement started now, so you would think that it's ridiculous. How was it able to somehow get a following? But it's works of Satan, and what he did was he twisted, made certain, like I say, he said it was written by Moses, and he did and challenged different concepts, and like any good lawyer, he twisted the words, misconstrued, did a lot of actions. Now, not only that, but in order to gain legitimacy, they made like a rabbinical colleges where they ordained ministers, or sometimes they call ministers, sometimes they call rabbis, and in that way they did this rebellion against God on a gigantic with a colossal, a very big way, and that way they were able to gain support because they made it look legitimate. They were ordaining their ministers, and they were able to gain. So if somebody followed them, they were following rabbis who they called their rabbis. So the movement became very, very prevalent in Europe, and
are these, would you say, secularized Jews?
exactly.
Or they're secularized real?
Exactly.
And I'm sorry, and the thing is interesting, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, he goes, then woe to those who write the book with their own hands and then say, "This is from Allah," to purchase a little price. Woe to them for what have written, and woe to them for what they earn by. So I mean, it's interesting. And this was actually referring to some of the people of Beni Israel, where you're manipulating God's words for your own benefit.
Well,
And
that's what they corrupted, and they corrupted the Torah. They may look like nice people and everything, but that doesn't negate the fact that it's totally corrupting the basics of our lives, because we believe that a person has a soul and a body, and the body is to serve the soul, to serve God. And they may be nice and everything, but that's, it's totally corrupt. And this movement was existed for around 100 years or so, and many of the Zionists, almost entirely, they were already children and grandchildren of these people who are totally estranged from Judaism. So they had secularized, as you say, the religion. They tried to, what they wanted to do, we call it assimilation. They felt they were in Europe, and they felt that they were being harassed because they were Jews. I didn't have to feel it. There was the oppression of Jewish people. Jewish people couldn't buy land. Jewish people were by the Christian society was hated and despised. And a lot of times there was the Inquisition, there was the Crusades. Jews suffered a lot. They were slaughtered, they were tortured in order to convert to Christianity. They were always suffering, and in our exilic existence. So these reform movement say that we'll assimilate, we'll drop the Jewish garb, will be, in fact, in their temples. A lot of times we call it synagogues where we pray. They start giving it a name temple. They changed many other things, but those and they started dressing like the priests in church. They put in an organ. We're not allowed to play music on the Sabbath with musical instruments. They put in an organ. They did everything, or just simply to assimilate and to be similar to the non-Jews, and they felt in that manner they will be accepted in society. As just a side issue, we're not prophets, and we don't understand. We don't understand God's ways. But very interestingly, Hitler came if like 100 is 150 years or whatever after this movement started, and it had spread like wildfire throughout Europe, and it was so the majority in Germany and many other lands were really non-religious Jews, and they had assimilated. So you would think these people felt that they guaranteed that they will not be harassed and they will be respected. They'll become professional lawyers, doctors, scientists, and they'll be looked up upon. But instead, what happened is, and it was like that for a time, but then Hitler comes along. His name should be eradicated, and he comes along and he said, "Oh, your grandparents were Jews." So he took from this high society, they called it, from Germany, where it was considered the most elite society in the Western world of brilliant scientists, lawyers, and everything. And they went and they said to these Jews that mingled amongst them, they said, "Oh, that you're a Jew, huh? Your grandparents are Jews. We're not interested if you're practicing or what." And from there it started the Holocaust, the slaughter of Jews. So God maybe was showing the people, you're trying to run away from God and you think that's going to be your protection. So God maybe showed from those people who are the essence of this assimilation, that is where the murder of Jews came, and it didn't help the fact they weren't practicing. And in fact, well, my grandparents came from Hungary, and Hungary was much more devout. They were much more religious, and that was the least killed. Maybe Hitler eventually rolled along there with the Nazis came. My father escaped from the Nazis. He was in Hungary, but my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. And it says once there's a decree that the hand of the Satan or whatever it may be is given by God, it is much. Even the righteous fall prey. So there were many righteous Jews, of course, who were murdered. But it's just interesting that you can look at the hands of God. People think they think that their protection is according to the way they will decide, according to their logic, what protects us by assimilating and so forth. And maybe God showed that just the opposite. You can't run away from God. God is the one who protects you. God is the one who rules the world. And if you try to outsmart him, so to say, then this is what the result is. I think it's just very ironic.
Yeah. So can you give a background on, for people, they've seen you, they want to know, who are you guys? To give a background of
Right.
the organization.
Yeah. Oh, and let me just finish. I'm not. Again, we're not in that way. We're not freeing the Nazis from being punished.
Yeah.
Of course, God punishes everyone exacting, but whenever something happens, it is for instance, a drunk driver mows down a person, God forbid. So some people will say, "Oh, he was totally, that it was that the drunk driver is, is evil and so forth, and he's going to be punished and so forth." But the one who was killed, it was tragic, he was totally innocent and so forth. We as a Jewish people say, true. The one drunk driver is responsible. He will be punished for what he did. But at the same time, if it wasn't the decree of God that person who he mowed down, who he killed, wouldn't have been a decree of God that he should die, then he could have been using a train, and he wouldn't have killed him. He wouldn't have hurt a hair off the person's head if it wasn't the decree of God that he should be killed. So the decree on that person who was killed, the same thing is with everything: a tsunami, a plague, a hunger, whatever it may be, God forbid. If everything is exacting, if it's a decree of God, that person who's punished, that person who's rewarded, everything is from the hands of God. The ones who do evil, they will be punished exactly because they have no right to do the evil what they're doing. I hope it's understandable what I'm saying. And by the way, I didn't finish. The other point was, so Zionism were mostly children and grandchildren already of these people that were totally estranged from religion, and they detested the religion, and they came along and they decided that they are going, that the assimilation is not working. That was one of their excuses, that assimilating doesn't bring about that security, the comfort that everybody considers them equal from the non-Jewish environment. They would go to the bars, they would get drunk with their friends, and the non-Jew would turn around and say, "Hey, you dirty Jew," or whatever. So they saw it didn't help assimilation. And they had one of the famous stories was the Dreyfus trial. There was somebody in the French army whose name was Captain Dreyfus, and he was accused of espionage. And then there was some very astute and honest and good reporter in one of the newspapers, and he said something doesn't smell right here. And he started delving into the issue, and he realized that Captain Dreyfus was a Jew, and he was simply was somebody higher than him, somebody who was the real spy, and they simply put the blame on the Jew. And he started starting fighting this and helping this guy, be adjudicated. And what happened was, the press started writing about it, and all of a sudden, all the newspapers were writing about it, and it started swimming up to the surface. A very nasty and a lot of anti-Semitism that people started writing about the Jews. And so, at that time, Theodor Herzl comes along, and he says, "You see, we believe he was simply the works of Satan to establish this, try to establish a Jewish state, so-called Jewish state, the state of Israel." But actually, the excuse was that, look, that assimilation is not the solution. So what we're going to do is create our own haven, our own safe haven, our own homeland, and in that way we'll be able to protect ourselves. Now we say, who's protecting you? God. You can't protect yourself. Only the Almighty protects you by following His Torah. You're protecting yourself. But He came along, so we'll make that is the establishment. The Zionists came, and ironically, the Reformed Jews, the Reformed leadership, were totally in opposition to Zionism, because they said they wanted to assimilate, and Zionists wanted to come and stick out like a sore thumb, create a safe haven. But later, being that the Reform is a movement that looks whatever is practical and more convenient, so when they saw that the Jewish people wanted so much this establishing the state of Israel, so then the Reform started following along, and they became one of the greatest supporters of the Zionism, the state of Israel. But Zionism basically is the establishment and the people were non-religious Jews.
So that's something that's interesting. Like a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, and I'll get back to what you're saying. Yeah. I just want to show you one picture here. You see, in 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the prime minister of the state of Israel, reading the Declaration of Independence, this most historic moment for them. And who's sitting by the dais? Not one of these people are covering their heads, which a Jew is required to. Imagine making a Muslim country without taking imams, sheikhs, ayatollahs, whatever you may call them, and this is the way they are. This is the creation of a Jewish state, a so-called Jewish state. It's a picture of Theodor Herzl. It's not a Jewish beard that he has there. So that's basically to show the hypocrisy. They're supposedly making a Jewish state, and it's really nothing to do with Judaism. It's a nationalism, and on the contrary, it's totally contradictory to the Jewish religion. And
so this is one thing a lot of people don't know historically. The movement, the Zionist movement that eventually led to the state, creating the Zionist entity in Palestine, these were secular, some of them even atheists, that were behind this. And, can you elaborate on this? This is something a lot of people don't know. People assume these are all rabbis, people, yarmulke. The pictures you showed, kind of shows that these people were not practicing Jews to begin with. And, a lot, if you could elaborate that on more.
Yeah, well, there was Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism. We have a book called The Traditional Torah Opposition to Zionism, Historical Documents. So we have the writings of Theodor Herzl and all the leaders. So just like you mentioned, Theodor Herzl as the father of Zionism, I'm quoting him in his own diary. He said, "The way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna." He was in Austria, in Vienna. That's where the Zionism started. He said, so the way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna to get an appointment with the Pope to make a mass conversion of all the Jews of Austria to Catholicism. It should be done on a Sunday, in the middle of the day, with music and pride publicly. We are the last generation that held on to the faith of our forefathers. The conversion will be in St. Stephen's Cathedral. He wrote about this, elaborated. In other words, his connection to Judaism was nil. He detested the religion. Jabotinsky, who was another father of Zionism, the founder of revisionist Zionism, wrote broadcasted in an article called "Outside the Encampment" in Haaretz newspaper, which is very well known, Haaretz newspaper, in October 22nd, in 1919. 1919, well before the state. This is one of the fathers of Zionism. And he wrote, "In the national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile and they refuse to shave off their beards and earlocks, this payas we call it earlocks, will be second-class citizens and will not have the right to vote." They're making a Jewish state, and Jews who have beards will not have the right to vote. I mean, you see the ridiculousness of the hypocrisy. It's a Jewish state? No, it's not a Jewish state. It's a national home for people who decided to create their national haven, their and sovereignty. But
So I'm curious. So this is what gets fascinating. Okay, you have when the beginning of the Zionist entities formed by secular or even atheist Jews, which is oxymoron. There's so, I mean, once you're an atheist, you're an atheist.
right.
But now, after 75 years, I mean, they're hijacking the religion, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what you have is, I mean, it's not just what we've seen in Gaza. We're talking about 75 years of brutality and genocide, where we know the 10 Commandments: you don't steal, you don't murder. The result of 75 years of secularism being promoted, from Theodore Herzl or David Ben Gurion till today, is this the real result of when you have Jews that go, I have no problem of babies being killed, stealing lands, and so on?
Well, yeah. So I'll explain with God. So first of all, we have to remember the Almighty. It's His world, as I was saying. He rules, but He also wants to see. That's the way that God is above our comprehension. That He gave the power to the Satan to confuse people, to see who's the righteous and who's not righteous. Like we say, we have a saying amongst us that if God wanted, He could create. We should be a world of angels. But that's not what God wanted. God created human beings with fallacies, and that to see who is going to use his life properly and to be victorious over his fight, the internal fight that every person has. So there's a Satan that's constantly trying to fool people and to make them sin. This Zionism was a movement that, as I say, is clearly a contradiction to religion. Judaism is subservience to God. Zionism is nationalism, void of godliness, but they using the facade of the religion in order to gain legitimacy, in order to be able to gain support. Because to create a national home, you need a massive amount of support. Even today, when you see different countries, when they're trying to create a country, it takes many, many years before, many times they're not successful in establishing. And when they finally are, it really needs, the world governments to approve of it and support them. So they understood these people. They were not, dumb people, basically, but they were very educated and very so they understood in order to have a support. So they wanted to make their state originally when they had these plans 150 years, 130 years ago, 120 years ago. They had in the 1990s, they had a meeting in Basel, Switzerland. They were thinking of making it in a lush land because it was before the time of technology. So you need a lush land to be productive. So they were going to make their country in Uganda, in Patagonia, different areas. But then they decided that in order to gain this tremendous amount of support that they need from Jews and non-Jews, the Christian world, so they will do is they'll go to Palestine. They'll use Christian people believe that the children of Israel, God gave the Bible and so forth. So they're going to use this belief of the Christianity. They'll tell the world, we are the children of Israel, that God gave us the land, totally conveniently ignoring the fact that we're in exile, expressly forbidden to recreate and establish a Jewish land.
Mostly, even before that, there's something more. All right.
Well, let me just finish this thought.
Go.
So they'll turn to them and they'll say, oh, we're the children of returning to the land that the Almighty gave us, that and it fits into the Christian belief that the Jews should go up to the Holy Land and there'll be Armageddon, and that God forbid maybe Christians and Jews and Muslims will fight each other and kill each other, God forbid, or accept Christianity. So they turn around. They said, you believe that the Jews have to be in the Holy Land, the children of Israel. So they'll gain the support. So they decided to use it, and they started using the name Israel. which Israel is the name of Jacob. They used the Star of David, and they decided they're going to establish a land. So remember, we as Jews were totally in opposition to the establishment of this so-called Jewish state, the state of Israel, even prior to the knowledge that it affects another people. In other words, if Palestine would have been, as many of the mantra of Zionism was, a land without a people, for a people without a land, that it was a desolate land, even 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty is unacceptable, is considered a rebellion against God. So we would be opposing this, and the rabbis did oppose this from day one. Now, therefore, we oppose this because we consider it a rebellion against God, because God sent us into exile, and we respect God is compassionate, and that's what. But being then added to that is being the fact that when they decided to use Palestine as their homeland because they need the massive support of the world, they automatically stepped on the rights of the inhabitants of Palestine because it was inhabited. The largest the indigenous population there were Muslims. Then there was the second largest population was Christian Arabs. Then there was a Jewish community that was living there for hundreds and hundreds of years. As I mentioned earlier, when we were sent into exile, as a nation, we're not allowed to establish a Jewish sovereignty. As individuals, we were able to live there. God permitted us to live this with the permission of whoever was ruling, like in that time, the Ottoman Empire. So we were living there. These 3 communities were living together in total solidarity. We babysat each other's children. We lived in harmony. So these communities were living there. Now the Zionists come along from Europe, and they're going to establish their state. And they had a problem, a technical problem. There were the Muslims living there. So they had to broadcast to the world, oh, it's a land without a people, for people that, but there's a few nomads who are coming on their camels, and they just say Jews.
Before that, there's something.
Yeah.
Now, there's another element to it, too. It's like, there was the eyes of the colonial aspect, the imperialistic aspect. It was no secret that the British were heavily involved. They colonized the land. We had the Balfour Declaration. Do you guys see that, one of the agendas for promoting Zionism, especially there when there was other lands where they can leverage, was a way for the British to put in a imperial outpost, if you want to call it, as a way to, maintain that there's no Muslim unity or dealing with, their arch enemy, the Muslims at the time.
Yeah.
Because, they were the biggest, backer of,
yeah,
of creating the state and pushing the Zionist movement.
Well, with the help of the Almighty, we always try to first, to go step by step. So we try to make it clear as the sun shines in the day, and you can see that the whole concept of Zionism is anathema, is totally unacceptable to Judaism. It is a total. It's just this day and night. There's darkness and light. Judaism is subservience to God. Zionism is a purely a material concept of nationalism, and totally unacceptable, as I say, because we're not allowed to leave exile. We're not allowed to oppress a people, steal and kill. So the establishment of the state, once they turned to Palestine, was reached, or not reached entirely. God help, that shouldn't be able to come to a complete, that they should have their state. It should be not. It shouldn't be established and cemented. It should be, with God help, end. We hope peacefully. God should help. But in order to do that, they wanted to establish the state. What they're doing today, to totally slaughter, remove anybody who stands in their way. So this is. I would try to clarify that. Now we go step by step. What you're talking about, once you understand the difference between Judaism and Zionism, and the clarity of it, that why it's wrong. Now we could go the fact why.
Yeah, that's it. Now we could differentiate.
Britain wanted to support it. Now there's a lot of reasons. Like I said, there are many people who simply felt the suffering of Jews. They sympathized. There's the Christian, many people who, ironically, like they say, that they bought it. They tried to use the concept of Armageddon, that they have a concept of Jews have to go up there and there should be this eventual slaughter, or God forbid, of Jews and Muslims or else, etc. But then there's many other issues that you can. We don't want to accuse people and say that everybody meant bad. That many people simply sympathize for the suffering Jews. But there's many who say that Britain were very happy. Many of the people in Britain who supported this, they simply wanted to be free of Jews, get them out. Just like hundreds of years before, the Jews were banished in Britain by York. They were slaughtered. There's a very, as in other parts of Europe. So many people in Britain, maybe there were a lot who wanted to get rid of them. So they were very happy to send them out there. And they were very happy, as you said, that they should have an established post in the distance, because especially with the issue of oil that they were starting to use,
well,
they felt unstable with the Muslim, that the Muslim people should have control of the oil, so they felt they'll have these people who are Europeans and who will be loyal to them. They'll be able to. So there's many issues we can talk about.
Well, you mentioned oil was interesting. Like RFK Jr., third party candidate for president, he famously goes and he talks about why America should support Israel, and he breaks down three. He goes, it functions as the largest aircraft carrier in the Middle East to strike on Americans' behalf. Two, he goes, American defense companies are profiting from, the genocide. And third, he goes, Israel function enables America to control the oil resources of the Middle East. So, you could be a hardcore Zionist, but at the end of the day, you may not realize that you yourself are being used for somebody else's plot.
Yeah, as a pawn for the.
And even.
But like we say, what you're saying is, I say 100%, there's a lot of other issues, but we are trying as our agenda to show that to clarify that people should understand, because people are being accused of anti-Semitic. So if people say, "Oh, it's not true," they'll be able, they'll refute what you're saying. You say that's only anti-Semitic talk. But we want to explain to uncover, to clarify what the issue is, the essence of what it's all about, to show that not only is it wrong because of the many issues what you're saying, but they're simply not Judaism. They are stealing, they are hijacking, they are using the facade of the religion as a cover for something that's totally not what it is. It's devoid of godliness. It's totally wrong. And I mentioned that we're not allowed to occupy, we're not allowed to steal or kill, we're not allowed to have our own Jewish state in an empty land. But also, on top of all the others that we're not allowed to steal or kill, we have to show gratitude for people that did good to us. The Muslim countries, when we went through the Crusades, when we went through the Inquisition, when we suffered so much, it was the Muslim countries, including the Ottoman Empire, that took the Jews in and embraced us, and we flourished. The Maimonides, Rambam, many through the generations, we flourished in Muslim countries. And God tells us in the Torah many times, remember always to show good that has been done to you and show gratitude. So we would be having to show gratitude to the people of Palestine and the Muslims. And here they go, Zionists, in order to be able to get control of the land and to take the land away from the Palestinians, over 500 villages. So they went and they had to tell the world that these people are anti-Semitic, they hate Jews, these they're third world people, and mostly it was empty the land, but the third world people are the ones who are trying to stop them, and they're simply anti-Semitic, and the Muslims and they're anti-Semitic. So it's so repugnant or repulsive what they're doing. Let me get to the one other point that you asked me before, because we keep on. I leave out, you ask me a question, I don't answer your question. Yes, how are they able to get the Jews to support them? Or religious? So I can say, because once they put on this facade for the world that, God gave us the land and so forth, so they have Satan has an endless source of money. And as we understand that part of it is the United States give billions and millions of dollars. So they pay the most expensive PR firms. They pay for and they have schooling institutions. They have television shows. They have radio programs. They have newspapers, anything you'd like. And they go into these schools by not the very religious. Usually they can't touch those, but they go to the ones who are either non-religious at all or just barely religious, who barely know their Torah, and they turn to them and they try to use emotions, and they say, see, God, you pray all the time to return to the Holy Land. As I mentioned earlier, we pray that God should forgive our sins and bring us close to Him again. But they totally take out, they gut what Judaism is. They take out the innards and they just bring with the shell of what it is, and they say, "Oh, remember, you're always yearning to return to the land. We are bringing you back to the land. God is giving you back with miracles. 2,000 years you were in exile, and now we are getting back to the land through miracles. God is giving back the land to us." And they tell people you're doing God's will by returning to the land, and they totally ignore and they count on the ignorance of the masses, that they don't know what the Torah is, that clearly states that we are in exile. And so they get a few rabbis, rotten apples, so they made a rabbinate and chief rabbis. We have rabbinates, we have chief rabbis who are living there in the Holy Land, who are totally in opposition to Zionism. In 1947, the chief rabbi of Palestine from the religious community that was living there hundreds of years, this community was God-fearing. And of course, they didn't want to leave exile. They were not interested in this whole concept of Zionism. They opposed it. But when they made the state, when they came along to make the state, so the chief rabbi of that community, Rabbi Dushinsky of the religious community, pleaded with the United Nations before they made the state in 1947. This is United Nations documents, a declaration before the United Nations, July 16, 1947. It was ratified by the United Nations in 1948. And he said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." We don't want this concept of a Jewish state. And the community that was living there stood up in opposition in 1948. You see the Sephardic Rabbi Ben Sina Chazan of blessed memory, went out with a white flag to the Jordanians to give over the community, and he was shot at. He had a bullet in his leg, and the Jews were murdered because they refused to support Zionism. Here you see, when that chief rabbi passed on, tens of thousands in the streets of Jerusalem going up to take the, and
by the way, so violence, we've seen since October 7th, that community in Jerusalem protesting the genocide.
Right.
And we've seen the brutal, I mean, this is what people don't realize when you see they are beating them down like Palestinians though. I mean, like brain hammer. Yeah.
You're seeing it now, but this is happening since the day.
And can you elaborate, like, just what's happening within your community, just being attacked by the Israeli police just in the past like 4 or 5 months? I know it's history, but it's with social media, you see it live and you see the brutality.
Well, Zionism, since day one, they got control over the land there. And so in the Holy Land, we have the community that was living there all the time. It was the smaller of the three communities. It was Muslim, the largest, Christian, and Jewish. But these were God-fearing people, so they never accepted the occupation, and they won't go voting, and they won't have anything to do with the Zionism. And they have this hundreds of thousands of Jews there. So a lot of times they would go out and demonstrate. Not that many. Sometimes it's thousands, sometimes less. And they would demonstrate because many people are afraid, because the Zionists are the police. They are the power. So they brutally beat from day one. They arrest, they assassinate, they beat. Jews refuse to go to this mandatory military service. So they get arrested because they refuse to go to the army, boys and girls. And this is what happens. They get beaten. I mean, you can see with horses, and with cars, they ride into the demonstrations. This is like the ongoing for 75 years. Here in Columbia University, I don't know, there was a scandal just a few weeks ago that a few students felt something smelled terrible, like dead bodies, and they got sick, and they were taken to the hospital, and they're trying to find out what happened, and they saw that was the Zionists attacked them. This is happening for us for years and years. They spray them with the stink spray. This is in Jerusalem. So this is what you're saying, it happened October 7th. We're having this all the time, but you're seeing it now, thank God, because there's the alternative media, not the major.
Yeah, I mean, with media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter.
So we are demonstrating. If it wouldn't be for this intimidation and attacks of the Zionists, we would have tens of thousands constantly standing up and telling the world, these guys are corrupt, they're thieves. What they're doing to the Palestinian people is murder. There's no other word for it. It's murder. It's the Nakba. Yeah, this colossal Nakba, what it's in Arab is the best word for it. This catastrophe.
Yeah.
What's happening, and it's beyond words what they're doing to the people in Palestine.
So let me ask you this:
we hurt with them. I want you to know that the Jews in Jerusalem going out and demonstrating, constantly, even though they're getting brutally beaten, and around the world, we also we get intimidated, we get threatened, we get attacked, but we go out and speak up. To a limited degree because of the intimidation, or else there will be so many more. But we are hurting with the people of Palestine. This is being done in our name. They're using the name Israel. They're telling the world it's doing in the name of God, in the name of religion, but it's not. It's a bogus religion. It's a bogus Judaism. It's a bogus a group of people that are simple nationalists that are using a religion to intimidate, and they get the support of the world leaders, just like in the apartheid. I think in South Africa, they didn't use maybe a religion, but they considered themselves religious, and they said they're godly, and they're able to oppress the black people because they came along. There's this narrative. I went to South Africa, and I listened to, they have the recordings going on Devil's Island, and they have the recordings going there that you hear their ministers, their leaders, their prime ministers, their leaders just kept on saying, it's good for the black people what we're doing. That's the mindset. And then they would go to church and say they're holy, and they're satisfied with that they're doing God's will, even though they had apartheid.
So, Rabbi Weiss, there's one I've seen in the States where you guys are, some of the most vile statements, like, you should have been burned in the Holocaust. I mean, like, right. And here's the one I'm always hearing. They use this Holocaust card, right? And I think one of your reps, or maybe you, said, hey, my family, I have ancestors that passed away in the Holocaust. So when you see the Zionist Jews trying to leverage the Holocaust card, and you and some of your members, they've lost family. How does it feel? I mean, when they try to use this Holocaust card to to belittle you guys or the movement?
Well, when you walk on your feet, your hands are soft. The bottom of your foot has hard skin. We're listening how they're desecrating God's name. That's worse than what they're attacking us. And we're fighting this and speaking out. So we're feeling this hurt constantly, and we're frustrated, we're humiliated what they're doing to the Palestinian people. We know how we used to live together in harmony, how the Muslim countries took us in, they embraced us, we lived in peace, and here we have to watch how they're going to Deir Yassin. I had old rabbis who were living in Palestine, and they would grit their teeth when they would tell us the attack on Deir Yassin and so forth, and the other over 500 villages. And they said, these were our neighbors. We lived together. They babysat our children. We babysat our children. We lived together in harmony and peace. And here they're coming and they're vilifying these people and killing them in the name of God. And so it's a desecration of God's name. It's a crime beyond words. It's a nakba. So we're feeling this constantly. Now they're using the Holocaust, so they're attacking us. That's secondary. I mean, maybe some people feel it works. Like you said, my father escaped Hungary when the Nazis came in. My grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. My father-in-law used to have nightmares. He was in Auschwitz, and he would wake up. We're talking 60 years later, and he would be screaming in the middle of the night. The majority of all our relatives were murdered and liquidated, in the Holocaust. But still, in all, we know we are religious Jews. We are proud to be Jews. We are proud that we are ready to give our lives for God, and we won't give up our religion. Now, these Zionists taking the ashes of our grandparents, of our relatives, millions and millions, 6 million and more who were killed in the Holocaust, and they're using them. After they were killed brutally, they're going to take their ashes and use them to rebel against God and to oppress another people, God's creation, the beautiful people of Palestine. It's beyond words, our hurt. And that's why we feel the responsibility. And the chief rabbi of Palestine, again, not to be confused with the Zionist rabbinate and chief rabbi, their farce that they call a rabbinate. our chief rabbi who was living after the Holocaust, his name was Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum, of blessed memory. And he actually lived in Palestine and then moved away and moved to New York. And he remained with the title chief rabbi, and he would take care of the Jewish communities in Jerusalem and Al-Quds in Palestine, and give out his edicts. And he was with the title chief rabbi, and he kept on urging people to leave Palestine, and he kept on speaking to and told and urged the Jewish people that we should go out into the streets and tell the world that Zionism is not Judaism. It's an ersatz Judaism. It's a false Judaism. It's bogus, and they're simply masquerading in a religion to intimidate and silence people and accuse them of being anti-Semitic. And they make Holocaust Yad Vashem and all these Holocaust memorials. And of course, the theme of the memorial is, and therefore you should support the state of Israel. And if you oppose them, you like the Nazis. That's the theme why they use the Holocaust. And if I come along, and I went to a Holocaust conference in Iran, where, mind you, they didn't call it the Holocaust Denial Conference. That's the label given by the Zionists. With it simply, they wanted to show that you can't use the Holocaust to oppress and steal Palestine. And the foreign minister, right at the beginning of the Holocaust, got up and said that. And I got up right after him and I spoke before maybe 1,000 reporters from around the world. And we said, we are clear that the conference will be to educate people to the millions of Jews that were killed in the Holocaust, but that explicitly, that's clear, that doesn't give the right to steal the land of the Palestinians and oppress them. So that was the theme of that conference. But the Zionists went and they said, Rabbi Weiss said the Holocaust was exaggerated. The Associated Press wrote this. And I had to threaten them with a lawsuit until they made a retraction. We have the retraction. They had to make a retraction. Yet the world goes around, and they vilify the Neturei Karta, like you say, and they tell us, oh, these Jews, deny the Holocaust. And being that they have the power of the mainstream media, the microphone, they're able to vilify the Palestinian people. They're able to vilify all the people that stand up for the Palestinian people in universities. Now students, professors are getting fired left and right. They're banning students for Palestine Association.
So here's something that's interesting. Right. Now you've seen in Europe, they equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. All right, in America, they were trying to do this on the congressional side. How does it feel like you are a Jewish American and you are against Zionism? This law would be pulled. I mean, this is just mind-boggling to say this. Can you tell the people that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism? Two different things. And as a Jewish American, that this doesn't equate.
Well, we say, again, we're asking people to take the time in such a critical issue, such a time when you're watching, now it's 28,000 people or more murdered, being murdered, and going into Rafah now. And I mean, it's just what's happening in Gaza. So it's really it's incumbent upon the people that when this is happening, that by World War II they were silent when 5 years Jews were being slaughtered, a little more than 5 years, and so they should now. They're seeing history repeat itself. People are being murdered, mass murdered, daily, minute by minute. They have to take the time to study this issue. Now, if you use basic common sense, come to the Jewish communities. In the United States, the largest concentration of religious Jews lives right across from Manhattan. Williamsburg, Brooklyn. There's a Williamsburg Bridge. Take the time. It's free, the bridge. Go across the bridge from Manhattan to Williamsburg. You'll come right in, you cross the bridge, you go right on the right side, you go 2-3 blocks in, you're in the heart of the most religious Jewish community. They give their lives for the religion. We have private education. We have large families. We don't have family planning. We have an average of maybe 7 children. Everybody pays for their children's education one by one. From when they're born till they get married, and it costs fortunes. We pay for the kosher food, for the Jewish dress. You can't just go into a Walmart and get clothing like that. It costs fortunes. We live our lives we give our lives for God. And yet, there's not one single Israeli flag in this community. You have the most distinguished scholars, great rabbis, pious community. There's not one Israeli flag. In other words, they're totally in opposition to the existence of the state of Israel. Now, if Zionism would be something that is a boon, something good for Judaism, of course they would be supporting it. But it's not. It's the total contradiction to Judaism. We considered it evil. The chief rabbi of Palestine, as I mentioned, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, came to Williamsburg and he settled there. And then the community spread out around. We living in different communities upstate, full of Jewish communities that are anti-Zionist. But that was the heart. And he kept on telling people, we must go out and tell the world, this is not Judaism. It's contradictory to Judaism. We're not allowed to kill. We're not allowed to steal. We're not allowed to oppress. And as I say, especially to people, we have to show gratitude, the ones who took us in. So Zionism and Judaism are total diametric opposites. Not only that, you're asking about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, the essence of anti-Semitism is the Zionist state of Israel. First of all, one little point that maybe I didn't stress enough. Their concept is that you'll ask a Zionist, why do you need a state? They say, what are you talking? Where's God to protect us? That's one of the mantras. Where's God to protect us? We have to have a state to protect us, guns. And so it's rooted in blasphemy and heresy that God is too weak. That's the root of it. And then they create their national home around this. So it's rooted in blasphemy and heresy, rebelling against God by killing and stealing and creating a state which is forbidden for us since the destruction of the temple, even in an uninhabited land. They come along and then they declare that if you oppose them, because they decided to masquerade in the state of Israel and the Jewish symbols, because they don't have any morals of God, so they don't have any compunctions. They have no problem with stealing the name of the people who died for their religion. And they use that. And then if anybody stands up, they call them anti-Semitic. But let's think for a second. Jews lived together with Muslims for hundreds of years without any human rights protection. We lived in Palestine for hundreds of years. We lived in the same courtyards. We have many Jews can attest to that, and many Arabs and Muslims will attest that still alive. People who remember how we lived together in all these villages in harmony. All of a sudden, Zionism came, a nationalist movement from Europe, not the religion Judaism. Jews were living as religious Jews there. They come along, this nationalist movement, and since they're there, there's rivers of blood of Muslims and Jews. You can go and look at the cemeteries of their army and see how many thousands were murdered. They died for their cause over there. So you're looking about thousands and thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of people are dying in order to implement this occupation. Who is anti-Semitic? What is anti-Semitism? They go to the world and they tell people today that after October 7th, yes, people are watching and seeing how people in the name of God, in the name of Judaism, are murdering without any conscience. They're watching children, women, innocent people crying from hunger, from pain, because they don't have medication. They're starving them. They insist you equate Judaism with Zionism. So what do you mean? Of course, they are exacerbating anti-Semitism. If somebody looked at a Jew before and he felt love for him, unfortunately, God forbid, they feel hate for the Jew now. They look at us like Nazis. So they exacerbate anti-Semitism, besides which that their murder is what they're doing. And they murdered Jews who stood up in opposition. Like I was showing, they're constantly beating Jews who are standing up against them. And Jews are dying, besides what they kill, the Jews are dying for their cause, their soldiers. So they are the essence of anti-Semitism. Not only if you oppose them are you not anti-Semitic, you are helping, with God's help, to stop anti-Semitism. If with God's help, with his compassion, God will remove speedily and peacefully the occupation. Will be stopping anti-Semitism by supporting them. You are anti-Semitic. You are supporting anti-Semitism and the exacerbation of anti-Semitism. The essence of anti-Semitism.
I want to ask you, you guys I've seen you guys act for 20 plus years. What makes this, I know it's the numbers, but this genocide so different from the stuff we've witnessed in the past? I mean, obviously, one big difference is that everyone's news is coming from here, your phone. It's not filtered by the mainstream media. You're seeing, I mean, yesterday, or they call the Super Bowl massacre, literally as bombs are being within seconds, dead babies, dead people. I mean, it's just what makes this different, in your opinion, compared to the other atrocities in the past?
Atrocities in the past that was happening in Palestine, or
Yes, in Palestine, yeah.
well, like you, first of all, the technology is growing now. Everybody has smartphones, and everybody is watching and seeing. It was on a smaller scale before. It was slow, and they remember they covered their actions with a narrative that the Palestinian people are they do not countenance, they do not accept other people from other religions, that they're anti-Semitic. So sometimes people saw a little bit of what they were doing, but they were always covering it up as if they were protecting themselves, or like they called it the IDF. Their army is called Israeli Defense Force. They're an army. No, they're Israeli Defense Force, and they're constantly talking about how they're protecting themselves, and trying to conflate the Holocaust. Just like they try to conflate Judaism with Zionism, they conflate the Holocaust and put it into one ball, one bed together with what's happening today. So it's the Nazis work together with the Mufti in Jerusalem, and they all are out to kill the Jews, and it's just a continuation of Nazis. And so every time somebody saw something that's happening, they saw, oh, certainly the leaders of Israel, these are they're connected to God, after all, and it's holy Jewish religion. They have a chief rabbi. They have, and Netanyahu goes to the United Nations and to Congress, and he rolls his eyes and talks about Mordechai and the Bible, and he's speaking from the Bible. He makes comments, so people think, oh, they can't do wrong. If anything, it must be that the Palestinians are just bad people. And so they were able to do their work slowly, and bit by bit they were able to take over the land from 48 till the 67, and on and on and on, and more settlements and more settlements. Slowly, step by step, do what they're doing. Now it's being done in a colossal, in a tremendous amount of people in one shot, and everybody's watching, and there's no explanation, a human explanation for this, that's a logical explanation. So the ones who are supporting it, it's simply an insult to common sense, to God gifted every human being, to watch this and to say that to buy into the narrative of Zionism. It's really an insult to every human being, to our common sense, and to our to godliness and to righteousness, to be able to continually shake the head in support of what they're doing. That's the difference. It's so obvious, it's so clear what they're doing, that it's inhumane. But still, in all the works of Satan, there are people who are supporting them. There are people who are silent. They were able to so successfully dehumanize, and to make them into villains, as if they hate other people, and they constantly, it's Hamas, it's Hamas, it's Hamas. What do you mean it's Hamas? What was 30 years ago? Where was 40 years ago? Start going back the dates and use your common sense, use a little bit of effort put into it, and see that it's not Hamas. Hamas was how many years? And how many years is this occupation going on? And so a person will start, and not only that, and if it is Hamas, which it isn't, but if let's just say it's Hamas, so why are they able to, if a mass murderer runs into a schoolyard with 1,000 children, you're going to say that you can just shoot out, put a bomb on the schoolyard? I mean, it's totally inhumane. We could say it's ungodly what they're doing.
So one thing I want to ask is, like, the fuel Zionism. Most people in America people don't realize that the biggest amount of Zionists are non-Jews. You have a huge evangelical community, politicians, and so on. Now, I've seen reports from secular Jews, and they look at they look at it as very suspicious. Here you have a group, a large block that have a lot of political sway, and they support Israel to the end. But the reasoning is they want a biblical prophecy that the Jews and the Muslims fight. Somehow this will lead to the coming of Christ, and then the Jews will be converted. Last time we heard forceful conversion, we think of the Inquisition. Um, why don't secular Jews or Zionists realize, hey, the people who are actually promoting this, putting the fuel in the fire, they have no good intention for what the outcome is for us?
Well, again, first of all, like I say, the Satan is a power that God gave that makes people confused. It doesn't. I'm not condoning it or trying to answer what people. But the fact is that we have to thank God that God gave us the comprehension to understand what is evil and what is not evil, because many people who do evil really think they're doing good. Again, I'm not condoning them in any way, trying to answer them, but that is the fact, unfortunately. Then there's the fact that there's many people who are intimidated. They're afraid to think, they're afraid to stand up, and they're even afraid to think because it will unsettle their lives. The life is, they're living in communities, they're living in the establishment, and it's going to disrupt their lives if they think too much. So they just accept, oh, well, you see all these great leaders and everybody else, and everybody's saying that it's, okay. Now you're asking, let's say, even the ones who say, how could they take support from the Christians? Well, not, first of all, like I say, I'm not trying to vilify all the Christians. There are many who feel they're guilty of the silence by World War II when Jews died.
Oh no, I was going to say, I'm like
many mean well,
the evangelical community.
But of course, I've heard murmurs amongst these communities, the Zionists. Yes, there are people who say, "How could we take support from them?" It doesn't. They feel uncomfortable with it at the end of the day, but they need the support. They're desperate for the support, and they take it and they say. But so there's a lot of different issues at play here, and different. Each two people are the same. So the people who don't understand that, there are people who are taking it. There's Christians who are different. Some are doing it for humane reasons. They feel it's humane. They're hoping, they pity the Jews that they don't have a place to go. And there's many different levels and different shades of what is happening here. All in all, the end of the day, it's total evil. It's the occupation is total evil. The occupation entirely from day one, when they started that state, is a rebellion against God. It's heresy. It's blasphemy. It's murder. It's killing. It's everything wrong. It's a nakba. And the rabbis have been always speaking up against it. We will never be, with God's help, we will not be silent till ultimately we know that God, with his compassion, it says in the Torah, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. This state will end entirely. Not that there will be a two-state or some type of state that there will be, even if they would give Palestinian people a lot of rights of the land, even we will never accept the 1 inch of this rebellion against God that's using the name Judaism, the state of Israel. We will never accept it, and it's all wrong. And the religious people who fell prey to the Zionism, it's simply they're being conned, as all the other people. They're being conned, misled, and because of the tremendous power of propaganda of the Zionists. But there will be a day that it will be clear, just like today, nobody can understand how apartheid was accepted at the South Africa was one of these states recognized in the United Nations, and their ambassadors were called Their Excellency. And Nelson Mandela was a terrorist in prison for 27 years. And here in the United States, years ago, blacks had to sit in the back of the bus. Jews, there were signs in the South that said Jews, the N-word, blacks and dogs, it can't come here. There were signs like that. You couldn't drink from the same fountain. You know that. So this is a fact of history. And these are the same people who went to church. These are the same people who believed that they were God-fearing, and they were, their lives were ruled, they believed, by God, and they were doing such evil. Yet they went and believed that they were doing right. So we have to understand that we have an obligation not to be stymied, not to be intimidated, and to try to educate and have the world. We believe ultimately it's in the hands of God. But anything happens in this world, Nazis, they murdered millions of Jews over 5 years. There was with the Inquisition, the Crusades. We don't understand God's ways, but one thing we know, that ultimately everything is in the hands of God. When the Roman Empire fell, the Greek Empire, they were etched in cement. USSR, who millions of people, when they practiced religion, they were eliminated. They were killed or sent to Siberia. And then 70 years, they were the most powerful country. Right, one of the two most powerful countries, a superpower, and all of a sudden, overnight, it went. We believe that everything is God's hands. We urge everybody to pray to God that He should bring a speedy, and God is all powerful. He can make it. He should bring a peaceful removal, dismantlement of this occupation to the last piece, to the last wreck of soil. And at the same time, we tell people that you must not be silent. You dare not be silent. You have to speak up. As non-Jews and as Jews, we urge Jews, it's being done in your name. We have a double obligation, even though we're attacked, intimidated, in the Holy Land, that brutally beaten. But we also get attacked and threatened with our lives. We went out demonstrations, our cars, the tires get cut a lot of times, the windows get smashed. We are urging everybody, we have to speak up and speak up. It's clear day and night. Zionism is nationalism, evil nationalism, flawed, selfish nationalism. Judaism is a religion. Judaism is 3,000 years of a covenant with God. Zionism is a 150-year movement. Do not confuse the two. You're not anti-Semitic when you speak up against it. You are anti-Semitic by helping continue the occupation. It is the most evil crime we're witnessing today.
Rabbi Weiss, something interesting, like, we've seen a lot of your members in the big rally a couple of weeks ago in DC, and we interviewed a lot of Jewish Americans, and the frustration's like, not under my name. This is what boiled them. And these are, all walks, especially the young ones. And I think one of the surveys recently polled is that this is the misconception that people, as if all Jewish Americans support Israel. The latest polls show the younger Jewish Americans have actually no connection, and they're angry about what's happening. So, going back, that this is not just, this is a group of people out of New York. No, I mean, this is actually articulate. I mean, this message is articulating across, the all across Jewish American. One thing I want to ask you is, being silent, whether you're a Jew, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, are you complicit with the genocide if you are staying silent, knowing what's happening?
Well, I'm not a judge in God's court, so we do not like to judge people, but we can only urge people. We plead, we urge, we cajole, we try to have since I'm a child, basically, I remember we were going to Manhattan. We go, and then since a teenager, I remember going to the United Nations, and we constantly try to tell the world leaders they were blessed by God, a gift, that they became a world leader, and they have to look to God and do what His will is, because if not, they're simply repaying God with bad for good, that they were given this special gift. So we're pleading with them. You are given this great position, either President of the United States or Prime Minister in England or wherever it is. You were given this, you are required to fulfill your duty as a leader of a world country. So we plead with them. Have the righteousness, justice, do what is right. The people of Palestine are being murdered. How would you answer eventually to God when the day when you're going to come after and stand in front of God and realize that you were given this great opportunity to do justice and to be written in the books of righteousness? How we will answer for yourself in the annals of history when you will be just like the people who were silent at the time, or silent, or even assisting in the time of the Nazis, or in the time of the other terrible crimes that we went through in history, or in South Africa, and the apartheid. And here they have the opportunity God gifted them. They have the beautiful privilege to be able to stand up and save humanity and do what's right with common sense, shows what's right. We always, again, look at the Jewish communities, whether it is in Al-Quds in Jerusalem, till New York, or in Stamford Hills in England, wherever the most religious communities, the Jewish communities, they are anti-Zionist. They are anti-Zionist, anti the existence of the state of Israel, of the occupation. These are pious, distinguished, God-fearing religious communities. If it would be something wrong with that, why would these most religious are the ones who are most opposed to the state of Israel? So they should understand this, study it, and stand up for what's clearly right, and stand up against what's clearly criminal, and save the people of Palestine with one move. I was just thinking this night, because we can't stop thinking about it. Our president goes once a year, and he forgives and it commutes the sentence of the turkey, right?
The pardon, yeah. Presidential pardon of Thanksgiving.
He pardons the turkey that he can live. He can pardon the people of Palestine for being Palestinian. He should pardon them. That they should pardon them. That they shouldn't be sentenced to death. They're going into Rafah now, the last little city that's right there next to now the last safe haven that they will safe haven. It's not a safe haven, but the last save them with one word. He should pardon the people of Palestine. Of course, I'm using the word, and of course, it's not pardon. There's nothing to be pardoned for. But he should save their lives. If he would step up to the plate, our president, and we're pleading with him. We're pleading with him. With respect, we're speaking to the president of the United States. You have that power. God gave you that power. Use it. Save the people. Put yourself in the annals of the great heroes of the world for history to remember.
All right. I know we're running out of time. Just the last set of question. Now, you mentioned a lot, like that there was no problem between Jews and Muslims, and this is not centuries. We're talking thousands, over 1,000+ years. Now, I believe maybe one of your reps were talking about how Jews were helped by the Muslims in Albania or Eastern Europe at the time during the Holocaust. During the Inquisition, the Ottoman, they helped bring in Jews to protect them from the church, what they were doing out there. And what's interesting, even in the time of the when the Caliphate began, Jews were not allowed to worship in Jerusalem. It was Umar ibn Khattab, the Caliph, who said, "No, you guys have the right." So, can you just talk, because the misconception that I think media presents, like these two people hate each other, and the reality is completely opposite. You mentioned people were babysitting, Jewish parents were babysitting Muslim kids, and Muslim parents were babysitting, Jewish kids. Can you talk about this? Because this helps break the notion that's presented like these are two people that hate each other, which is completely false.
Yeah. Well, again, people always, unfortunately, it's portrayed, especially now, that in the Jewish world, the more the religious, the more Zionist they are, because you see the settlers, they're always in the news. But you have to know they come what they call from either non-religious, from universities, or they're coming with these young settlers, or they're coming from what they call modern Orthodox. That's a euphemism for compromised orthodoxy, or compromised religion. In other words, they don't have the basics. They didn't almost entirely. They didn't go to the religious Jewish schools where they would have been taught daily that Zionism is the greatest rebellion against God. Occupation hurts us. We cry, we hurt with the Palestinian people. They would have been brought up in the very religious opposition to the occupation. But people don't see this, so they get the portrayal. They look at Netanyahu as the right-wing government, the religious and what they call the religious government, sometimes the extreme religious, and they're the ones who are supporting what's happening. It's false. It's the very religious communities are in total opposition. And what do we teach our children? We teach our children, as God told us, that we have to teach our children to be thankful and to remember, never forget good that is done for us. It's verses in the Torah that says that. Moses, when we went out of Egypt, it says that he smite the Pharaoh with 10 makos, with the 10 plagues. The first was that the water should turn to blood. And it says that Moses said he can't hit the water because if anybody who reads the Torah, the Bible, knows the history that he was hidden in a wicker basket in the water, so in the Nile. So he said, I can't hit the water because it did good to me. We teach that to our children. We teach that the Torah tells us that we should sing. So we are taught, we are required, according to Judaism. And our very religious communities, we teach our children to be thankful for the Muslim communities for taking us in. Like I say, our greatest leaders, codifier of Jewish law, Rambam, Maimonides, he wrote his works in Arabic, many of it, and he was in Egypt. And then we have the Rambam. We have many of our leaders. They were in Arab and Muslim countries. My wife's great grandfather, 14 generations ago, was one of the great leaders of Judaism. His name was Rabbi Naftali Katz of blessed memory. He's buried in Istanbul. I just was there. When I go to Turkey, I go visit his grave. Many people go there also to visit his grave. We don't pray to according to Jewish belief. We just go to a place of holy site. And
that's one of they go. I think from one of the historical Jewish documents, and the Jews that went to Turkey, they even call that was one of the golden eras, being in Istanbul and being in Turkey, where they said we weren't persecuted. We conduct our business unlike what they faced in Europe. So I mean, the record kind of speaks for itself, but unfortunately, the media makes this narrative as if Jews and Muslims are hate each other. That's not the case.
It's relentless. Zionism is 75 years. I mean, they had the microphone in their hands. They had mainstream media. They refused to. We've been demonstrating. I'm telling you, I have a white beard till 120. We as a youth, I remember we would go to the United Nations and demonstrate, and so on. Never gets covered. It's totally ignored. Sometimes you'd hear the traffic reports, and it would say, "Oh, there's a traffic jam," but they won't say what. But if there's a small Zionist thing, then they'll say, "Oh, there's a Zionist parade, a Zionist this." But when the Jews who are anti-Zionist, they're always busy belittling, ridiculing, not ignoring, the fact of the religious communities and the ones who are true to the Jewish religion, that we oppose Zionism, and that we don't consider the people who are outspoken against Zionism anti-Semitic. Like I say, anti-Semitic is Zionism. They are the personification of anti-Semitism. So it's really ironic, and people are getting charged left and right today. While this mass slaughter is happening, you can hear the way it's reported. I mean, it's somebody should put out a book about this. Just every day, the reports, the way when they speak about the people who are being murdered in Gaza, and the way. And when they speak of the Israeli side, it's like it's two narratives. It's like he's changing his hat.
The lexicon, they'll change the lexicon, make it pass back. One's killed, crazy. One died. Yeah. As we conclude on this, two things. What is the message that you send to young people in America? Because obviously they are not buying into this narrative, and we've seen the most vocal amongst this, the Gen Z crowd. What do you tell these young people out there? What the message to them?
Well, with the help of the Almighty, we urge everybody to pray to God. We believe He's the ruler of the world, and everything good and we consider bad, everything is from God is good. We don't understand everything, but whatever happens, when there's we believe that everything is in God's hand, and therefore we should pray to Him, fervently pray that He should bring immediate end of the occupation of Palestine, speedily and peacefully, which God is capable. Of course, that said, we should not be intimidated. You should not be silent. Speak up to whatever powers you have. You have connections with politicians. You have connections with other people. Do what is in your capability to influence the rulers, the leaders in the world, the politicians, and so forth, that they should immediately bring an end, force the end of cessation, of course, the ceasefire, like everybody's saying in Gaza, and the end of this occupation. It will happen. It's just like the apartheid. Today, you won't say, let's have a part apartheid, a little bit of an apartheid. Everybody says, this is evil. You can't have it. It can't be. It can't exist. And it will stop. You won't say in the United States we should have a little bit of some type of, what they the aggression that you had against the people and people of color here in the United States. Nobody would accept even one drop of it. Right away, it becomes a court case, and people will sue and people make demonstrations. This occupation is evil. It has no justification. It's not Judaism. It's not Judaism. It's not anti-Semitic to stand up. We plead with people, stand up, don't be intimidated. Now, I can't judge everybody. People, of course, like we said before, people have limitations and they're afraid and they can't, but do what you can, and sometimes think out of the box how you can help. And that's what we plead. And we would love the message to get to the people of Gaza and to people of Palestine. We are hurting with you. We are suffering with you. And take strength, because we know that I've heard messages from them. They believe in God. God, at the end of the day, unfortunately, people they're being murdered, but God is here. We don't understand him. He will save us. He will save the people of Gaza. And let's keep on praying and doing and take solace, like I say, that there are people around the world who are feeling with you. We're doing. God will help. God will. We hope, with his compassion, that he will bring an end of this occupation, so we can live again in peace and harmony with although we're distinctly different religions. That's not an impediment to peace. We should, as history attests, we will be able to live together. And this is one a little point. People say, how could that be? You're not going to be able to live together. First of all, so we say, look at history. Like, the person learns from the history. And you can see that we always were able to live together. And that is said. I've been to Lebanon. We've been to Egypt. We've been to Jordan. We've been to Gaza. The leaders of these groups, contrary to what people say, it hurts. Of course it hurts. When people are killed, innocent people are killed, when the babies, innocent people are killed. First of all, the narratives of the Zionists of October 7th is a lot of baloney. A lot of it is false, what they said. But even the ones who did die and the innocent people who died, it hurts. The people of Hamas don't want to kill. The people in Hezbollah don't want to kill. The fact is that oppression, an action brings reaction. And we're not justifying, we're not talking about that. It's right, the murder. We're saying that nobody wants this death. They simply cannot be oppressed. And oppression brings that a result of death and suffering. So the people of Hamas embraced me. Like when we were in Gaza, the leaders of Hamas embraced me. They're unembarrassed. They didn't have a problem with saying we are friends with Jews. We want to live together. And as they write in their writings. People say the original charter. They've written clearly to rectify and to clarify. They're not against Jews. They write that clearly in their writings. And with the latest statement they put out a few weeks ago, they're not against Jews. We want to live together. So if you will remove this occupation, you will see that we'll be able to live together in peace and harmony. Just like in South Africa, blacks and whites can live together. Even though they went through the apartheid, people say, how will it happen? It's simply a Zionist narrative, a Zionist ploy to say that, to put fear-mongering and say we can't live together. Again, first of all, you have to clarify. Do not confuse Judaism and Zionism. Let's understand, because a doctor, in order to prescribe medication, he has to diagnose a sickness. So let's put the solution to one side. So we shouldn't confuse it, because if you refute what I'm saying, you'll say it's not true. You have another angle. You'll say that it's illogical what I'm saying, but at least admit that the diagnosis of the evil, what happened here, is that the occupation is the cause. The occupation is the cause of the suffering of bloodshed, and the villains are the Zionism and the state of Israel. The victims are the Palestinian people and the Jewish people who oppose them. Now, once we have that, we can turn to what the solution is. That's a separate issue. And the solution is very simply remove this occupation. You'll see that the people are ingrained in them, the goodness of the people of Palestine, and they have nothing against Jews. Even their leaders in Hezbollah, in Lebanon, people in Hamas, like I say, they hurt also. They don't want to see these people dying, the Jewish people. They want peace. So you will see that if you remove the cause of bloodshed, the occupation, they are the ones who are the cause of these tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of Muslims and Jews who are dying since the advent of Zionism. Remove it and we can live in peace. You'll say there's a few thousand people maybe who committed atrocities. They have to answer them. They have to go in court. The ones the Zionists, they say, I can't live there because the people are going to take revenge on me. So let these people, the United States and Britain and all these countries that are infusing billions and billions of dollars a year for arms, let them take these people and resettle them in another country. I'm not saying they have to go to court and answer for their injustice, but let them be resettled someplace else if they don't come. Not because of that, you have to continue the occupation, and then we can live together. The Jewish people can easily live together with the Muslim people. In fact, we're much closer, as you mentioned. We all believe in one God. And the history shows that it makes sense that we should be living together. So with God's help, we can. The solution is in our hands. It's just right on the doorstep. It's simple. The removal of the occupation, we will be living in peace, inshallah.
There's one last question. Always something that's always curious to me. So most of the Jews in Israel, they have two passports. They have the Israeli passport and the British, the American, South, whatever it may be. And one of the, I think, the badge of honor is that if you limit, like, I only keep one passport, and it goes to the conviction of Zionism. When you hold that two passport and you're willing to say, I'm going to flee the country, if that situation ever comes, what does that tell you? Do they really believe in the conviction of Zionism?
Well, you know what? A lot of today, the Zionists today, remember, Zionism, it started 100 odd years ago, and it was a movement of people. There's very few, most probably today, that are real Zionists that have this pure ideology, this direct concept that they're going to create their home. They're simply wanting to live the lives in the country that they are in. They're looking for their life to be stable and and peaceful, and so they don't even have that conviction and that belief anymore. Most probably the majority of people, they're not hard Zionists that were, but that's not an answer. That's not, unfortunately, it's not it still doesn't condone or forgive the fact that the people that they're supporting the state that is oppressing and stealing the land from the Palestinians. Even though, like I say, a lot of it is because they bought into the story that the Palestinians are going to murder them. The Zionists, they use the most expensive PR firms, and they keep on telling them that they're going to be murdered if the Palestinians come in, and therefore they use fear mongering and so forth. It's not an excuse. I'm not condoning it, but like you say, that most of the people they're not these hard Zionists. They just want to live a simple, a basic, a good life. That's what you would find, and the ones that you're always hearing about are the ones that are the hardliners and so forth. These are the politicians you have in a lot. That's what I would think. Anyway, again, it doesn't answer for the crime that's being done.
All right, Rabbi Weiss, thank you. I know it took more time than we I promise this little take, but again, really appreciate it, and I hope our audience gets a better understanding that within Judaism, it doesn't automatically equate to Zionism, and we hope that Rabbi Weiss was able to articulate that. And don't forget to follow them on Twitter. You get a lot of great updates and information regarding the movement. Thank you very much.